Some people walk into a new job hoping to be noticed. Elena Brooks walked in hoping to disappear. The glass doors of Cole Enterprises reflected her quiet determination as she stepped inside, clutching her folder just a little tighter than necessary. It wasn't nerves exactly, it was caution. Life had taught her that being seen too much often came with consequences she wasn't ready to face again. The lobby buzzed with polished voices and confident laughter, everything about it sharp and intimidating. Elena kept her head slightly lowered as she followed the other new hires toward orientation, choosing a seat at the far end of the room. Not too close. Not too visible. Safe. She listened carefully, took notes, nodded when expected, but spoke only when necessary. It was a system she had perfected. And then, without warning, the room shifted. The quiet murmurs faded into respectful silence as the doors opened again. Footsteps, measured, unhurried, filled the space. Elena didn't need to look up to know who it was. Everyone else already had. Adrian Cole, the Billionaire CEO. She told herself not to look. But curiosity is a subtle thing. Her eyes lifted for just a second, and met his. It was brief. Almost nothing. But it felt like something. Sure. Where? As if he had noticed her, specifically. Elena quickly looked away, her pulse betraying her calm expression. That was exactly what she didn't want. Attention. Especially from someone like him. From that moment on, she made a silent decision. Avoid him. Avoid his presence. Avoid his gaze. Avoid anything that could pull her into his world. Because Elena Brooks wasn't here to be seen. She was here to survive. And she had no idea that the one man she intended to avoid had already noticed she was trying. Avoidance, Elena Brooks had learned, was an art form. It wasn't about running, it was about precision. Timing. Awareness. Within days, she had memorized the rhythm of Cole Enterprises. The busiest hours in the elevators, the quieter stairwells, the exact moments Adrian Cole stepped onto each floor. She adjusted her schedule with quiet efficiency, always a step ahead, always just out of reach. If he entered from the front, she exited through the side. If he attended a meeting, she found a reason to be elsewhere. If his presence lingered, she made herself scarce. To anyone else it would seem like coincidence. But to Adrian Cole it was obvious. From his office high above the city, he began to notice the pattern. At first it was subtle. A new employee who never lingered. A face that appeared once, then vanished before a second glance. But Adrian was not a man who missed details. And Elena Brooks was becoming one. One afternoon, as he walked through the main corridor surrounded by executives, his eyes shifted, just briefly, to the far end of the hall. There she was, organizing files. Focused, quiet. And the moment she sensed movement, she turned, too quickly, and disappeared into another department. Adrian stopped walking. Not long enough for anyone else to question it, but long enough to confirm what he already suspected. She was avoiding him. A faint smirk touched his lips before he continued on, his interest now fully awakened. It wasn't arrogance that drove him, he was simply intrigued. In a building filled with people eager to impress him, eager to be noticed, eager to be close. Elena Brooks wanted none of it. And that, more than anything, made her impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, Elena believed her strategy was working perfectly. She didn't see the subtle glances, didn't notice the quiet curiosity forming, didn't realize that the more she avoided Adrian Cole, the more she stood out to him. And Adrian was not a man who ignored things that captured his attention. It happened on a night Elena thought she had carefully planned. The office had long emptied, the usual noise replaced by a soft, echoing silence. It was the safest time to work. No crowded hallways, no unexpected encounters, no risk of running into him. Or so she believed. Elena sat at her desk, focused on finishing a report she wanted off her mind before morning. The glow of her screen lit her calm expression, her fingers moving steadily across the keyboard. For once she felt in control. Until she heard the door open. The sound was quiet, but unmistakable. Her hands froze. Slowly she looked up. Adrian Cole stepped into the room as if he had always belonged there, which in truth he did. His presence alone shifted the air, calm yet commanding, his sharp gaze landing on her almost instantly. Elena stood up quickly, her instincts kicking in. "I was just leaving," she said, gathering her things without meeting his eyes. She moved toward the door. But before she could reach it, click, the sound of the lock echoed louder than it should have. Elena's breath caught as she turned back. Adrian stood by the door, one hand still resting near the lock, his expression unreadable, except for the faint smirk forming at the corner of his lips. "Leaving already?" he asked calmly. She didn't answer. He took a slow step forward, not threatening, not rushed, just deliberate. "Or," he added, his voice quieter now, "are you avoiding me?" The question hung in the air, heavier than the silence. Elena forced herself to stay composed. "No, sir." But her voice betrayed her, just slightly. Adrian noticed. Of course he did. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, just as suddenly as he had locked the door, Adrian reached back and unlocked it again. Click. "You should get home," he said simply, stepping aside. No pressure. No explanation. Elena didn't hesitate this time. She walked past him, her heart unsteady, her thoughts louder than ever. And as she left, one truth settled in her mind. Avoiding Adrian Cole was no longer going to be easy. Because now, he was paying attention. After that night, Elena Brooks knew one thing for certain. Her invisibility was gone. Not completely. Not to everyone. But to Adrian Cole, she had been seen. The realization followed her through the next few days like a quiet shadow. She still kept her routine, still moved with careful intention, but something had changed. Avoidance no longer felt like control, it felt like delay. And Adrian wasn't the type to forget. It started subtly. An email. Short. Direct. Unexpected. A task assigned specifically to her. Elena stared at the message longer than necessary, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she debated her options. Declining wasn't realistic. Ignoring it wasn't possible. So she accepted. Their first interaction after that night was brief. Professional. Controlled. She delivered the files he requested, her posture straight, her voice steady. Adrian listened, asked a few questions. Nothing unusual, nothing personal. But his eyes never left her. Not in a way that made her uncomfortable, just aware. "Seen again." "Thank you, Miss Brooks," he said calmly. And that was it. No mention of the locked door. No mention of her avoidance. If anything, he acted as though nothing had happened. And somehow that unsettled her more. Days passed and the pattern continued. Small assignments. Occasional conversations. Moments that forced her into his orbit, but never trapped her there. Adrian didn't push. He observed. And Elena noticed. She noticed that he never raised his voice. Never rushed decisions. Never treated her like she was insignificant, despite the distance she tried to maintain. It didn't make sense. He wasn't what she expected. And that was the problem. Because the more Elena saw who Adrian Cole really was, the harder it became to hold on to the version of him she had built in her mind. The version that made it easy to stay away. Now there were cracks. Small ones. But enough to let something unfamiliar slip through. Curiosity. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of trust. Trust doesn't arrive all at once. For Elena Brooks, it came quietly, on a day that almost broke her. It started like any other. Deadlines. Emails. The steady rhythm of work that kept her focused and distant from everything else. She preferred it that way. It left no room for mistakes, no room for attention. Until everything shifted. A report, one she had carefully completed, was suddenly presented in a meeting with critical errors attached to her name. The room turned tense, eyes subtly drifting toward her as whispers formed beneath polite silence. Elena's chest tightened. She knew her work. She knew she hadn't made those mistakes. But standing there, surrounded by people who barely knew her, doubt felt louder than truth. "I'll review it again," she said softly, her voice controlled but strained. No one argued. No one defended her either. And then, "That won't be necessary." The voice cut through the room with calm authority. "Adrian Cole." Elena's breath caught as all attention shifted to him. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't show irritation. But the certainty in his tone was enough to silence everything else. He stepped forward, placing a file on the table. "The original report is here," he said simply. "Miss Brooks submitted it correctly." Pause. Then realization spread across the room. Someone else had altered it. The blame was never hers. Elena stood frozen, unsure what to say, what to feel. Relief came first, sharp and immediate. But something else followed close behind. Gratitude. Adrian didn't look at her for praise. Didn't wait for acknowledgement. He simply corrected the mistake, and moved on. Just like that. Later, as the office slowly returned to normal, Elena found herself sitting at her desk, staring at nothing in particular. He hadn't needed to step in. But he did. Not for recognition. Not for attention. Just because it was right. And for the first time since she met him. Elena Brooks didn't feel like avoiding Adrian Cole. She felt like understanding him. Because kindness, when least expected, has a way of breaking down even the strongest walls. And hers were starting to fall. The rain came without warning. One moment the evening sky was calm, quiet and dim as employees filtered out of Cole Enterprises. The next, heavy drops began to fall, quickly turning into a relentless downpour that blurred the city lights into streaks of silver. Elena Brooks stood just outside the building, sheltered beneath the overhang. She hadn't brought an umbrella. She rarely did. Planning for herself had never been a priority, only getting through the day. She wrapped her arms lightly around herself, watching as people rushed past, cars pulling up, headlights slicing through the rain. One by one, the crowd disappeared, leaving her alone with the sound of water hitting pavement. She could wait it out. She always did. Planning to stay there all night? The voice came from behind her. Familiar now. Steady. Elena turned slowly. Adrian Cole stood a few steps away, his coat draped neatly over his shoulders, completely unbothered by the storm. In his hand he held an umbrella, but he hadn't opened it yet. "I'll be fine," she replied quietly. He studied her for a moment, as if weighing her words against something unspoken. "I know you will," he said. "That doesn't mean you have to be." The response caught her off guard. Simple. Honest. No pressure. He stepped closer, opening the umbrella with a soft click. Then, without another word, he tilted it slightly toward her. An offer, not a command. Elena hesitated. This wasn't part of her plan. But neither was standing alone in the rain, pretending she preferred it. Slowly, she stepped under the umbrella. Not too close. Just enough. They walked in silence at first, the rhythm of the rain filling the space between them. Adrian led her toward a waiting car, opening the door without ceremony. Inside, the world felt quieter. Smaller. Safer. "Where to?" he asked. Elena gave her address, her voice softer than before. And as the car moved through the rain-soaked streets, something shifted again. Something subtle but undeniable. For the first time. She wasn't trying to escape his presence. She was allowing it. And somehow, that felt like a bigger step than anything she had done before. Some moments don't ask for permission. They simply happen, quietly, unexpectedly, and leave something behind that cannot be undone. For Elena Brooks, that moment came on an ordinary evening that didn't feel ordinary at all. The office was nearly empty again, the soft hum of lights filling the silence as she sat across from Adrian Cole in a small meeting room. What had started as a simple discussion had somehow stretched longer than either of them planned. This time she hadn't tried to leave. And that alone said more than words ever could. "You don't trust easily," Adrian said, his voice calm, not accusing, just certain. Elena looked down at her hands, her fingers tightening slightly. "I used to," she admitted quietly. The words felt heavier than she expected. Adrian didn't interrupt. Didn't rush her. So, for the first time she let the silence speak for her, until it didn't. "I believed someone once," she continued, her voice softer now. "And it cost me more than I was ready to lose." She didn't go into details. She didn't need to. The weight of it was already there. For a moment, the room felt smaller, her composure slipping just enough for the past to catch up with her. Elena blinked quickly, trying to steady herself, but the emotions she had carefully kept buried began to surface. And before she could pull back, Adrian moved. Not abruptly. Not forcefully. Just enough. He stepped closer and gently wrapped his arms around her. It wasn't possessive. It wasn't complicated. It was steady. Warm. Safe. Elena froze at first, caught between instinct and feeling. But then, slowly, almost cautiously, she let herself lean into it. No words. No expectations. Just presence. And for the first time in a long time. She didn't feel like she had to hold everything together on her own. When they finally pulled apart, nothing had been said, but everything had changed. Because some walls don't fall with time. They fall in moments like this. And Elena Brooks had just taken her first real step toward letting someone in. After that night, silence between them no longer felt like distance. It felt like understanding. Elena Brooks didn't wake up the next morning as a completely different person. She still moved carefully, still chose her words with intention. But something inside her had shifted, something quiet, yet undeniable. She stopped avoiding Adrian Cole. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But in small, meaningful ways, she no longer checked the hallway before stepping out of her office. She didn't rush to leave when he entered her room. And when their paths crossed, she didn't immediately look away. She stayed. And Adrian noticed. Of course he did. Their conversations became more natural, no longer confined to short exchanges or formal tasks. Sometimes it was about work. Sometimes it wasn't. A simple question about her day. A quiet observation about the city outside the window. Moments that felt normal. Unexpectedly normal. One afternoon, they stood side by side near the large glass windows overlooking the skyline. The city stretched endlessly beneath them, alive and moving, while they remained still in their own quiet space. "You're not avoiding me anymore," Adrian said, his tone light but certain. Elena let out a soft breath, her gaze fixed ahead. "No," she admitted. Pause. "I realized something," she added after a moment. "Avoiding you wasn't protecting me. It was just keeping me stuck." Adrian didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. The honesty in her voice was enough. For the first time, Elena wasn't reacting out of fear. She was choosing something different. Choosing to trust, carefully but genuinely. And Adrian, for all his confidence and control, found himself doing the same. He shared more. Not everything. But enough for her to see beyond the title, beyond the reputation. Enough for her to understand that behind the composed exterior was someone just as guarded in his own way. They weren't rushing. They weren't forcing anything. They were simply allowing. And sometimes that's how the strongest connections begin. Not with intensity, but with quiet consistency. And as Elena stood there, no longer trying to escape his presence, she realized something she hadn't expected. Being close to Adrian Cole didn't feel like a risk anymore. It felt like something worth holding onto. Even the strongest walls have cracks, and even the most cautious hearts can feel vulnerable. For Elena Brooks, those cracks had begun to widen in ways she hadn't anticipated. Being near Adrian Cole no longer felt like a battle to avoid attention. It felt like a choice she wanted to make. But with that choice came a quiet fear she couldn't ignore. She had seen glimpses of his world, the expectations, the pressures, the people waiting for him to bend to their rules. And she wondered quietly if she belonged there at all. For days she found herself pulling back, keeping interactions brief, responding with less warmth, retreating into the careful distance that had once been her armor. Adrian noticed immediately. He didn't push. Not openly. But one afternoon, when she tried to slip out of a meeting before he arrived, he intercepted her gently in the hallway. His expression was calm, but there was a softness in his eyes she couldn't ignore. "Why are you pulling away?" he asked quietly, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. Elena looked down, twisting the strap of her bag, her chest tightening. I don't belong in your world," she admitted, almost in a whisper. "I'm not like you. I don't fit here." Adrian shook his head, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "This isn't about fitting into my world. It's about us," he said. "And I don't want you to leave, not because of anything else. Just because I don't want to lose you." The words settled around her like warmth in winter. Not demanding. Not pressuring. Just honest. Elena felt her walls tremble. Her fear of being seen, being judged, being pushed out, it was real. But so was the pull she had been denying herself. For the first time, she realized that avoidance had never protected her. It had only delayed the inevitable truth. Adrian Cole was someone worth risking fear for. And she didn't want to lose him, not now, not ever. The city lights shimmered through the glass walls of Cole Enterprises, reflecting the night sky and the life bustling far below. Elena Brooks stood in the quiet of the office, the hum of the building around her fading into background noise. Her heart was racing, not from work, not from deadlines, but from something far more real. Adrian Cole appeared behind her, calm, confident, yet with a softness she had only seen in rare, fleeting moments. There was no locked door this time. No hesitation. Just the man who had slowly become the center of her thoughts, the one she had tried to avoid, and now couldn't imagine not having near her. "You were going to leave again?" he said gently, stepping closer. His voice carried neither judgment nor impatience. Just concern. Elena's gaze dropped for a moment, then lifted, meeting his steady eyes. "I was scared," she admitted. "Scared that I couldn't fit in, or that I'd lose myself in all of this." Adrian reached out, not to command or control, but to offer comfort. He didn't speak for a moment, letting the space between them fill with understanding. Then, softly, he said, "You don't have to fit anyone's expectations. Not mine. Just be yourself." And that was all she needed. Slowly, almost instinctively, Elena stepped forward. The hesitation melted away. They embraced, not in a dramatic flourish but in a steady, grounding hug. Arms wrapped, foreheads almost touching, breaths mingling. It was a quiet promise, a reassurance, a choice made in silence, that here in this space they were both safe. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. "Nor am I," he replied. For Elena, the fear that had once guided her decisions dissolved, replaced by something stronger. Trust, connection, and the quiet certainty that this closeness, this patience, this love, was forever. And as they stood there, holding on to each other, neither of them needing more words, one truth was clear. They had chosen each other, not for power, not for appearances, not for anything but the quiet, enduring strength of simply being together. A beginning, not of fear, but of forever.